Marie first planted the lavender on a breezy Sunday afternoon, the sun warm on her shoulders, a soft wind rustling the leaves overhead. She chose the spot near the porch because it caught the best light, and because the gentle fragrance reminded her of a small field in the south of France where, years earlier, she'd once lain on her stomach, sighting down a rifle barrel as a Green Beret sniper, waiting for the breathless stillness between heartbeats to squeeze the trigger. She never imagined that a plant, delicate and purple and trembling in the breeze, could spark a war.at first. The letter was polite. White paper, printed header. The language crisp and distant. Dear resident, please be advised that your landscaping is in violation of HOA guidelines as lavender is not an approved ornamental species for your yard. Kindly remove it within 10 days to avoid fines. Marie had stood in the kitchen reading it, a faint frown in her brow. She flipped the page, looking for details, for any explanation beyond a generic rule number. Nothing. Just a signature, Karen Whitmore, HOA board member. She showed it to her husband, David, who was standing at the sink washing breakfast plates. David, a quiet, lanky man, with a wry sense of humor and an engineer's mind, frowned and wiped his hands dry. It's a plant, he said. It's not radioactive. Marie chuckled. That's what you think. But this looks like a warning shot. David raised an eyebrow. A warning shot over a flower. Marie tilted her head, scanning the letter again, her instincts prickling. I've seen this kind of language before. They're probing for weakness. She tucked the letter away, but a weight settled in her chest. 2 days later, another letter arrived, this one less polite. A formal notice of violation. A threat of escalating daily fines. It cited an obscure line in the HOA bylaws about unauthorized flora that may attract pollinators disruptive to community enjoyment. David threw his hands up. Disruptive to community enjoyment? Are they afraid of bees? But Marie didn't laugh this time. She'd seen how bureaucratic language could morph into a weapon, how rules designed for safety could become instruments of power. She decided to leave the lavender untouched, and that's when the real harassment began. It started subtly. Neighbors stopped waving as they passed by. Conversations grew curt. Mrs. Perkins from across the street, who'd once brought over banana bread on Sundays, suddenly pulled her children closer when Marie waved from the porch. Then came the black SUVs, prowling the neighborhood at odd hours, windows tinted dark. One parked across from their house at 2 a.m. and idled for 30 minutes before rolling away. Marie stood behind the curtains, arms folded, heart drumming not from fear, but from recognition. She knew surveillance vehicles. She'd worked inside them. She knew the rhythm of intimidation. She whispered to David. This isn't just Karen being a busybody. Something bigger is going on. David tried to reassure her. It's just a plant, Marie. This will blow over. But she felt the tension tightening around their home like a noose. Days turned to weeks. The letters kept arriving, each more severe than the last. HOA inspectors began walking slowly past their fence, cameras clicking, writing notes on clipboards. A citation arrived claiming Marie's security cameras violated aesthetic uniformity standards. Another letter declared David's perfectly ordinary black mailbox non-compliant. Marie began cataloging everything. Times. License plates. Names. Faces. The next escalation was a courtesy visit. Karen herself showed up on their doorstep, wearing a crisp blue blazer and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marie, Karen said sweetly, I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding, but the lavender really has to go. It sets a precedent. Marie studied her. A precedent for what? Karen's smile froze for half a second, then returned. For chaos. David stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. It's a plant, Karen. The bees like it. So does my wife. Karen tilted her head, her tone icy. Some of us appreciate order, David. We keep the neighborhood pleasant, safe, consistent. Marie felt her old training kick in. She noted the small earpiece tucked discreetly behind Karen's hair. The way Karen's eyes flicked past her shoulder toward a black SUV idling down the street. This is bigger than flowers, isn't it? Marie murmured. Karen's smile widened. Everything's connected. You'd be surprised what one small thing can disrupt. Then she left, heels clicking briskly down the porch steps. That night, David tried to make light of it. He poured Marie a glass of wine and made spaghetti, insisting they weren't going to let the HOA bully them out of their home. But Marie ate quietly, chewing over Karen's words. She knew how control worked. She knew how power seeped into people's lives, not all at once, but in small, relentless drops until it filled every corner. The next morning, they woke to find the lavender uprooted, dumped in a heap on their driveway, roots torn and soil crumbling. Marie stared at the mess, jaw clenched. David knelt beside her, lifting a broken stem. They did this. Marie nodded. They want us to leave. David exhaled shakily. Then they picked the wrong couple. Marie's eyes narrowed. Time to push back. That same afternoon, she pulled dusty crates down from the attic. Inside were old military gear, field notebooks, encrypted radios. She kept them tucked away, a piece of her past she thought she'd left behind. But as she lined up the equipment on the dining table, she felt something long dormant reawaken inside her. A cool, precise calm. She started mapping their neighborhood. She marked locations where HOA patrols lingered. She noted the times the SUVs appeared. She tracked neighbors who had suddenly become hostile. David watched her, a mix of admiration and worry. Marie, we're civilians now. Marie loaded fresh batteries into a handheld radio. So is Karen. But she's running ops like a covert team. I'm not sitting this out. David leaned closer. What are we going to do? First, Marie said, we find out who's backing her. The next night, they installed hidden cameras facing the street. Marie set motion-triggered alarms on the perimeter of their yard. She stayed up late, cross-referencing HOA board member names with business records and property deeds. And it didn't take long to see the patterns. Karen's name appeared on the board of a private security consulting firm specializing in neighborhood stabilization. That company was connected to another LLC tied to regional real estate investors buying foreclosed homes in bulk. Karen's HOA enforcement is about pushing people out. Marie murmured, tapping through records on her laptop. They drive people into default with fines and threats, then flip their properties. David shook his head. So this is organized crime. Marie met his eyes. With clipboards instead of guns. But the same tactics. The tension in the neighborhood thickened. More neighbors stopped speaking to them. Trash was thrown over their fence. A rumor circulated that David was unstable. That Marie was dangerous. HOA newsletters began carrying subtle warnings about residents who refused community standards. One morning, Marie stood on the porch and spotted a drone buzzing overhead, lingering over their yard. Its lens swiveled, focusing on their house. She raised a camera and snapped photos of it in return. That evening, an HOA letter arrived citing unauthorized surveillance of community airspace. David read it aloud and burst out laughing. They're filming us, and we're the violators? Marie gave a humorless smile. That's how they win. They control the story. But Marie wasn't about to let them write her story for her. Marie decided intelligence gathering wouldn't be enough. The stakes were escalating too quickly. She knew Karen was planning something bigger, and each new sign felt like a drumbeat approaching from far off, echoing closer by the hour. A week after the drone incident, she was awake past midnight, scanning through neighborhood camera footage on her laptop when she noticed a pattern she'd missed before. The black SUVs weren't random. They rotated through the neighborhood on a schedule, circling every 4 hours, sometimes pausing in front of specific homes. And it wasn't just her house. She zoomed in on license plates. Some were legitimate local plates. Others were temporary tags registered in distant counties. She jotted each number down in a small green notebook. David came into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. You're gonna burn yourself out. I'm close to figuring it out. Marie murmured, eyes fixed on the screen. He sat beside her and studied the map she'd sketched out. Why so many cars? They can't all be HOA goons. They're watching patterns, Marie said. Looking for habits. Who leaves early? Who comes home late? Who might be alone during the day? They're building profiles. David blinked. Other neighbors? Marie tapped the screen. Not just neighbors. Targets. David leaned back, exhaling. God. How did we get here over a flower? Marie's jaw tightened. Because control doesn't start big. It starts small. 2 days later, the HOA delivered notices of random home inspections to multiple houses on their block. The language was clinical, almost polite, but carried the same chill as the letters Marie used to translate from foreign intelligence documents. David read their notice aloud, voice rising in disbelief. Potential structural noncompliance and security hazards observed. Home inspection required. Non-cooperation will result in penalties. Marie took the paper and read it twice. Security hazards? What, like garden hoses? David said softly. They want an excuse to get inside our house. Marie glanced at the cameras over their front door. Let them try. But she'll. David added gently. They're using fear. It's the same tactic Marie used to fight overseas. Mrs. Perkins covered her mouth. But this is America, Marie murmured. Authoritarianism wears different clothes here. At night, things grew worse. Someone broke a garden light in their yard. They found tire tracks looping through the grass. Once, Marie stepped outside at 3 a.m. to see a man in a dark hoodie snapping photos of their house. When she yelled, he sprinted away, leaping over a hedge. David started locking every door twice, sometimes 3 times. The worst blow came when David's employer called him into a private Zoom meeting. They said we're getting complaints about your wife, his boss said, glancing nervously at the camera. Rumors of threatening behavior. Violence. David, is everything okay at home? David sat there frozen, mouth opening and closing. This is about the HOA. They're retaliating. His boss looked skeptical. Even so, the board wants to be cautious. Clients could see the news. Maybe it's best if you take a leave of absence for a few weeks. After the call ended, David stared at the blank screen, color drained from his face. They're trying to destroy us. Marie's heart ached as she wrapped her arms around him. Then we fight harder. But she knew the stakes had just skyrocketed. The following day, she went into full operational mode. She started drafting an evidence package. She cataloged every letter, every photo of suspicious vehicles, every incident of property damage. She gathered screenshots of online HOA newsletters that subtly labeled her a risk. She installed new software on her laptop to trace IP addresses. She called an old contact from her military days, a cybersecurity analyst named Lucas, who owed her more than one favor. Marie, Lucas said over an encrypted call. Are you telling me your HOA is running psyops on you? Marie's lips curved in a grim smile. I'm telling you they're trying to run an influence campaign. And they're getting help. Lucas whistled. Send me everything. Within days, Lucas called back, voice low and tense. Marie, you're not crazy. The domain registrations for your HOA's website route through offshore servers. And some of the names behind Civic Asset Solutions pop up in other HOA management companies around the country. You're looking at a network. Marie's pulse spiked. A network doing what? Buying neighborhoods. Forcing people out. Then flipping the houses through shell companies. It's corporate gentrification on steroids. Marie gripped the phone until her knuckles turned white. That's why they want us gone. Lucas hesitated. And Marie, it's not just the HOA. Some of those shell companies trace back to private equity groups that do business with federal contracts. Marie went cold all over. Meaning what? Meaning if you take them on, you're not just fighting Karen and her clipboard. You're stepping into a billion-dollar machine. Marie took a deep breath. Then we'd better aim carefully. She and David made a plan. They began documenting neighbor testimonies. Quiet conversations in garages and backyards turned into secret strategy sessions. A small group of neighbors emerged, braver than the rest. A retired judge, a young teacher, a veteran named Kyle, who had a Marine Corps tattoo winding around his bicep. Kyle pounded the table one night. I didn't dodge IDs overseas to come home and be terrorized over a fucking lavender plant. Marie nodded. We need to expose them publicly. Sunlight kills operations like these. So she called Janessa, the young local journalist who'd already smelled something deeper beneath the HOA's polite facade. Janessa met them in their kitchen, a notebook balanced on her knee. Her eyes were fierce. People think HOA horror stories are just petty suburban drama. I think this is organized crime hiding in plain sight. Marie showed her everything. Photos. License plates. Copies of surveillance footage. Janessa looked up slowly. This is way bigger than Lavender, Marie said. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. Within days, Janessa's first story broke online. The headline read, Paramilitary Tactics and Private Equity, How One HOA Became a Neighborhood Nightmare. Traffic to the story crashed Janessa's news site. National networks picked it up. Commentators raged about civil liberties and corporate abuse. Politicians tweeted demands for inquiries, and the neighborhood erupted. Some residents cheered Marie as a hero. Others accused her of endangering property values. A few families quietly sold their houses and slipped away, afraid the war would escalate. Karen, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen in public, but HOA newsletters kept arriving, each one colder and more menacing. Certain individuals are jeopardizing community safety with extremist behavior. Residents are urged to report suspicious activity. David read the newsletter aloud, voice shaking. They're calling you an extremist. Marie stood unmoving. Let them. I have the truth. And late one night, as rain lashed the windows, Marie sat at her laptop and typed out a final declaration. To anyone reading this. They tried to break us. They tried to isolate us. But we're still here. And we're not leaving. She hit publish. After Marie hit publish, the quiet neighborhood felt as though it was vibrating on a tight wire. The story had gone viral. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Local news sites, national outlets, podcasts, social media. Headlines screamed about HOA corruption, private security forces, and billion-dollar shell corporations. News vans appeared at the neighborhood gates, crews setting up cameras. Microphones bobbed as reporters tried to interview anyone who would speak. David peered out the window and groaned. Oh God! Channel 12 is in our front yard. Marie stood at his shoulder, arms folded. Good. Let them film the Lavender. Yet she knew the attention came at a price. Some neighbors were outraged, terrified their property values would tank. They accused Marie of dragging private affairs into public view. Others quietly passed notes into Marie's mailbox. Thank you. You gave us courage. Please keep going. At night, Marie and David lay awake, listening to cars creeping slowly past their house. Sometimes they heard footsteps in the yard. Once, Marie caught a silhouette outside their fence, flashlight flickering through bushes. She charged out the door, gun in hand, only to find the intruder gone, leaving nothing but boot prints in wet soil. Meanwhile, Karen remained unseen, but her influence didn't vanish. A new round of letters arrived from the HOA, each more threatening than the last. This is your final warning to comply with neighborhood regulations. Failure to cooperate will result in legal action and possible property seizure. One letter bore no letterhead at all, just black block letters reading, You think you've won. This is bigger than you. David stood at the kitchen table, holding the letter in trembling fingers. Marie, this is starting to feel like a real war. Marie pulled him close, her voice low but fierce. Good. Let them see we're not afraid. But even Marie felt the toll. She caught herself jumping at sudden noises. Her hand twitched toward her waistband when a neighbor's car backfired. She started scanning rooftops instinctively, looking for glints of glass that might signal optics or cameras. One evening, David found her sitting on the stairs, staring into nothing. Marie, talk to me. She blinked slowly. I can't stop thinking how close they came. They were inside our perimeter, David. They were inside our neighborhood. They turned our neighbors against us. Over a flower. David swallowed. It's not just a flower, though. It's about who controls the rules. Marie nodded, eyes distant. Exactly. That's why we can't stop. David sat beside her, leaning his shoulder against hers. Promise me one thing. What? That after this, we'll plant lavender again. No matter what happens. Marie managed a tired smile. Deal? But the HOA kept tightening its grip. In early December, HOA inspectors began approaching homes one by one. They knocked on doors, demanded to photograph interiors, and cited obscure security provisions in the community's bylaws. Mrs. Perkins called Marie, voice trembling. They want to come inside and check my counter surfaces for reflective hazards. Marie, what does that even mean? Marie felt rage coil hot in her chest. It means they're trying to intimidate you. Tell them no. And tell them you have an attorney. An attorney? I can't afford one. Then use mine, Marie said. He's working pro bono. Meanwhile, HOA newsletters painted Marie as an extremist. They labeled her a potential domestic threat. They distributed photos of her holding a firearm. Cropped from the night she confronted the tactical team and claimed she was endangering community stability. Marie stared at the newsletter, fury blazing behind her eyes. They're prepping the ground for something bigger. David nodded grimly. Another raid? Marie shook her head. Not yet. They're trying to isolate us. Break our credibility. Turn the whole neighborhood into informants. She wasn't wrong. Soon, new cameras appeared on lampposts, tiny domes glinting under the streetlights. HOA security. Stickers appeared on contractor vans parked for hours along the curb. Marie began wearing a GoPro clip discreetly to her jacket. She kept a recording device running in her purse. She trained David how to check their car for trackers. And still, the letters kept coming. This is your final notice. Cease spreading misinformation or legal consequences will ensue. Marie responded by doubling down. She created a digital Dropbox filled with all the evidence she and David had gathered. Surveillance photos, HOA documents, invoices revealing shell companies. She shared the link with journalists, lawyers, veterans groups. One night, sitting by candlelight during a blackout suspiciously affecting only their block, David whispered. What if this backfires? What if they spin it and say you're leading some cult or militia? Marie gave a small, bitter laugh. Let them try. Facts are stubborn things. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was fracturing. Half the residents were terrified but loyal to Marie. bringing casseroles and leaving supportive notes on their doorstep. The other half glared at her in the grocery store, refusing to speak. A man named Mr. Kowalski, who'd once lent Marie his hedge trimmers, confronted her in front of the mailboxes. "This was a good neighborhood before you stirred up trouble," he snapped. "Now it's all news trucks and lawsuits. You should have just pulled up the damn plant." Marie met his eyes, voice steady. "And what happens when it's your turn, Mr. Kowalski? When they decide your flagpole, or your garden hose, or your lawn gnome doesn't comply?" He stared at her, mouth opening and closing, then stomped away. Be White Christmas. The HOA ramped up its propaganda. Flyers appeared in mailboxes showing doctored photos of Marie's face superimposed over images of burning American flags. The text screamed, "Is this who you want protecting our community?" David held the flyer in shaking hands. "This is slander. This is..." Marie gently took the paper and fed it into the shredder. "We're winning. That's why they're desperate." Yet in the silence afterward, she sat at the table, staring into the dark, fingers curled tightly around her coffee mug, because she knew Karen was still out there, and Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. The tension in the neighborhood grew so thick Marie felt as though the entire place were vibrating at some hidden frequency, just waiting for something to snap. In late December, as the air turned brittle, and white frost covered lawns in delicate lace, a strange quiet settled over the neighborhood. It wasn't the peaceful hush of holiday mornings. It was the silence of people waiting, afraid to speak too loudly for fear of being overheard. Marie noticed it in small things. A neighbor, who once waved every morning, now kept her eyes lowered, rushing from car to front door. A boy who used to ride his scooter up and down the sidewalk now stayed inside, curtains drawn. On Christmas Eve, Marie and David went for a walk under twinkling lights strung between houses. They passed homes glowing warm with laughter and music. Yet when they reached the community center, they saw a newly posted sign on the door. "Community gathering canceled until further notice." For safety, Marie ran her fingers over the paper, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. David murmured, "They've managed to shut everyone up without firing a shot." Marie clenched her jaw. "We'll make them talk again." On New Year's Day, the HOA dropped a bombshell. Every household received a thick envelope labeled urgent. Inside was a glossy packet of new HOA regulations. The language was dense, legalistic, littered with references to emergency security powers. One clause jumped out at Marie. Any property owner found engaging in activities deemed subversive to community order may be subject to immediate property seizure and eviction, pending board review. David read it aloud, his voice trembling. "Pending board review? That's just them deciding on their own who gets kicked out." Marie's pulse thundered in her ears. "They're laying the legal groundwork. This is how they plan to make us disappear." That night, she stayed up marking passages in the new bylaws, her highlighter blazing neon yellow across page after page. "They're rewriting the rulebook," she whispered, "to make everything we're doing illegal." Meanwhile, neighborhood divisions grew sharper. One evening, Marie went to check her mailbox and found a woman waiting near the hedge. Her name was Tricia, a young mom with 2 kids who had always been polite but distant. Tricia glanced around, then spoke in a rush. "I think they're putting pressure on my husband at work. He came home white as a ghost. He said his boss told him people are asking questions about me talking to you. Marie, I'm scared." Marie lowered her voice. "Did you sign anything?" Tricia swallowed. "They brought me papers. Said it was just a community update. But I didn't read them all the way." Marie's stomach sank. "They're using people as signatures. Pretending there's community consensus." Tricia covered her mouth, eyes brimming. "What do I do?" "Don't sign anything else," Marie said. "If they try to force you, call me first." That same week, HOA compliance officers started measuring distances between houses, scrutinizing fence lines, and photographing driveways. Rumors spread that entire rows of homes would be fined for non-conforming landscaping. Marie knew the tactic well. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Financial exhaustion. Force people to sell. Buy cheap. Flip for profit. But she also saw the spark of resistance growing. On a cold January night, she hosted a small meeting in her garage. Folding chairs. Coffee and mismatched mugs. Half the neighborhood seemed to squeeze into the space, bundled in winter coats, eyes bright with determination and fear. Kyle, the Marine vet, stood up and slammed a fist into his palm. "We need to start recording everything. Every letter. Every visit. Hell, every conversation." A retired judge named Mr. Jensen added, "We can file for injunctions. They're trying to slip in unconstitutional clauses. That's actionable." Mrs. Perkins, voice trembling but firm, raised her hand. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. This is extortion. And I'm not leaving my home." David watched it all with wonder. "Look at them, Marie. A month ago, half these people wouldn't even open their doors." Marie's throat tightened. "That's what they're afraid of. A united neighborhood." They formed committees. Legal teams. Neighborhood patrols. Young tech-savvy residents offered to scan public records and dig into shell corporations. Within days, they found documents revealing Civic Asset Solutions had purchased blocks of foreclosed properties in multiple states. The same pattern repeated everywhere. HOA takes control, finds people into bankruptcy. Properties change hands for pennies. On the $1 spreadsheet showed projected profits in millions. Marie stared at it, rage boiling in her chest. "We've been their business plan all along." David rubbed his forehead. "How many other neighborhoods are going through this?" Marie whispered. "Thousands. They just don't know it yet." The revelation spread like wildfire. Journalists camped outside the community gates. News crews tried to interview residents as they left for work. Karen remained conspicuously absent, but HOA newsletters kept dropping sinister hints about extremist elements, threatening community stability. One newsletter headline read, "Don't let outsiders destroy what we built." Marie held the paper, feeling the propaganda sink like a weight into her gut. "They're trying to flip the narrative. Turn neighbors into informants." David sighed. "Why does this feel like Cold War propaganda?" Marie gave a grim smile. "Because it is." One cold evening in February, Marie and David walked past houses where blinds quivered as neighbors peeked out. A child's ball rolled into the street. An elderly man shuffled past them, giving a wary nod. David muttered, "Sometimes it's like we're living in a spy movie." Marie squeezed his hand. "No. Spy movies are simpler. This is messier. Because it's home." But even as fear clawed at the edges of their world, Marie saw glimmers of hope. Neighbors who'd once stayed silent began coming forward. More people showed up at the garage meetings. People pooled funds for legal challenges. A website launched called HOA Truth, filled with tips on resisting predatory tactics. And every day, someone slipped Marie a quiet note, a whispered thanks, or a trembling confession. "I thought I was alone. They told me not to talk to you. But I'm tired of being afraid. Please keep fighting." One evening, as snow fell outside, Marie sat with David at the kitchen table, their laptops glowing in the dim light. David looked at her, voice soft. "You know what the scariest part is?" "What?" Marie asked. "That you might actually win. And then you'll have to keep fighting forever." Marie gave a weary laugh. "That's the only way you keep your home, David. You stay vigilant." David took her hand. "I'm with you." Marie nodded, feeling the same steel slide into place that had carried her through combat zones. Because she understood what Karen hadn't yet realized, that once a neighborhood learned how to stand together, it became the toughest fortress of all. And though she was exhausted, afraid, and often overwhelmed, Marie also knew one thing with absolute certainty. They weren't going anywhere. Karen came back. Not in the dead of night with tactical teams this time, but in the bold light of a late autumn afternoon, as if daring Marie to deny her presence. She pulled up in a glossy black Lexus, the engine barely humming, and parked it deliberately across Marie's driveway so no one else could enter or leave. The neighborhood felt frozen as she stepped out, dressed in an immaculate cream pantsuit, hair perfectly smoothed, a folder clutched in her manicured hands. Marie watched from the living room window. She felt no panic, only a familiar clarity, the same sensation she used to feel when the sniper scope settled into perfect focus, locking onto an enemy moving through a distant field. David hovered beside her, uneasy. "What does she want now?" Marie murmured. "One of two things. Either she's surrendering, or she's here to flip the narrative one last time." Karen strode up the walkway and knocked, not tentatively but with a crisp rhythm, as if demanding an audience. Marie opened the door a fraction, blocking Karen's view of the house behind her. "Marie," Karen said, voice syrup smooth. "May I come in?" "No," Marie replied. Karen inhaled delicately. "Then I'll keep it brief. You've won the neighborhood battle. Congratulations. But you're fighting something much bigger than you realize." Marie folded her arms. "Try me." Karen tilted her head. "You become a public figure, whether you want it or not. People are watching you now. You could have influence, resources, a place at the table. Why keep fighting from the outside when you could help guide the system from within?" Marie let out a quiet laugh, humorless. "You want me to join you?" Karen's eyes glinted. "I want you to protect this community. And others like it. You're a soldier. You understand that order matters. That sometimes people need to be steered for their own good." Marie stared at her, mind cycling through memories. A rooftop in Mosul, a radio crackling in her ear, the hot metal scent of gun oil, the steady trigger squeeze. "I fought wars to keep people free, not to turn suburban streets into battlefields." Karen's jaw tensed. "If you think you can stop what's coming, you're naive. There are bigger forces at play. This neighborhood was just one test site. The same model is rolling out across dozens of communities. Investors, data firms, private security networks. You think you shut us down? We're just changing uniforms." Marie felt the weight of Karen's words, like a stone settling in her chest. Karen leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But I can keep you safe. I can make sure you're protected. You and David. You'd never have to look over your shoulder again." Marie held her gaze for a long silent moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Karen, I'd rather sleep with one eye open than sell my soul." Karen's expression flickered. The perfect mask slipped for an instant, revealing pure fury beneath a polished exterior. Then she straightened her shoulders, collected her folder, and turned away. "You'll regret this," she said over her shoulder. "This story isn't over." Marie watched as the Lexus glided away, leaving only silence and the faint scent of Karen's floral perfume lingering in the autumn air. David came up behind her. "Do you think she's bluffing?" Marie shook her head. "No. She's planning her next move." And sure enough, over the next weeks, fresh waves of intimidation arrived. Anonymous letters in their mailbox. Emails from unfamiliar addresses warning Marie to stop the lies. Neighbors found leaflets on their porches accusing Marie and David of being domestic terrorists. But this time, something was different. Instead of shrinking back, the neighbors pushed forward. Mrs. Perkins, who'd once crossed the street to avoid Marie, showed up at their door carrying a bundt cake, eyes blazing. "If they try anything, you call me," she declared. "I might be small, but I've got a big mouth." A young couple, Mike and Jana, organized a lavender day, where residents planted lavender in their front yards in quiet rebellion. Soon the entire block smelled sweet and floral, a silent statement that no one family would stand alone again. At the next HOA meeting, Jim Carson, the newly elected president, a retired Navy chief petty officer, stood before the gathered residents and said, "This neighborhood is not a military base. We're not at war with each other. Anyone who wants to run it like one can get the hell out." The room erupted in cheers. Meanwhile, Marie and David found themselves thrust into national conversations. Interviews on cable news. Invitations to conferences. Veteran groups asking them to speak about how authoritarian control can creep into civilian life through seemingly innocuous institutions. Lena's inbox overflowed with messages. "My HOA fines me for hanging my husband's Marine Corps flag. They said my garden gnomes were a security hazard. They told me my solar panels made my roof visually disruptive." Each story drove home the same truth. This was bigger than a single HOA. It was an entire ecosystem of power, money, and data designed to squeeze profit out of people's homes. And their fear. One evening, David looked up from his laptop. "Do you realize we're part of a national movement now?" Marie sighed. "That's the problem. We were just trying to live our lives. But now we're saving other people's lives too, David said. That's not nothing. They traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress. Marie stood in a hearing room with its gilded ceilings and rows of solemn lawmakers, cameras flashing. She spoke about lavender, drones, black SUVs, and midnight raids. She explained how fear starts small, a letter, a rumor, and grows until entire neighborhoods are paralyzed, and she ended by saying, "This isn't just about flowers or fences. It's about whether Americans can feel safe in their own homes." Lawmakers rose to their feet, applauding. A new bill was proposed, the Homeowners Protection and Transparency Act, mandating independent audits of HOA finances, strict limits on surveillance, and severe penalties for using private security forces for intimidation. When Marie returned home, the neighborhood held a block party in her honor. Lavender cupcakes, purple ribbons tied around mailboxes, neighbors laughing together instead of whispering in fear. Yet Marie knew better than to believe it was over. Late one night, she sat on the porch with David, staring up at stars winking through a canopy of branches. "I can't shake this feeling," she said. "That Karen wasn't lying. That there are others." David slipped an arm around her. "There probably are. But look how many people are awake now. We're not alone." Marie nodded, eyes distant. "I just keep thinking how close we came to losing everything. Over a flower. Over an idea." David squeezed her hand. "We're still here." Marie looked at the lavender blooming again in their front yard. Bees flitted lazily among the purple blossoms. Neighbors walked past, waving and smiling, no longer avoiding eye contact. Yet even as peace returned, Marie kept one eye on the horizon. She still checked under the eaves for hidden cameras. She still scanned the street for unfamiliar vehicles, because she knew that power never truly disappears. It just changes its name, its uniforms, its tactics. And if Karen, or someone like her, ever tried again, Marie would be ready. One night, as a gentle breeze rustled through the lavender, David asked, "Do you ever wish we just pulled up the plant and avoided all this?" Marie took a deep breath. "Every day. But if we pulled it out, we have been pulling up our own right to live freely. And I'm not giving that up for anyone." David kissed her gently. "Then we keep fighting?" Marie nodded, a faint smile curling her lips. "We keep fighting." The lavender swayed softly in the moonlight, fragrant and bright, as if daring anyone to try and tear it up again. Winter came gently that year, as though the neighborhood had earned a respite. Frost-dusted rooftops, and morning smelled of wood smoke and cold earth. Christmas lights appeared on eaves and shrubs, blinking softly in the darkness. For the first time in months, Marie felt her pulse slow as she walked the block, inhaling crisp air scented faintly with pine. But even amid wreaths and holiday songs, reminders of the war lingered. She noticed certain neighbors still watching her cautiously, as though unsure whether she was a hero or a troublemaker. Packages sometimes arrived late, delayed because carriers were verifying addresses. Drones occasionally hovered on the edge of town, and though they might have belonged to hobbyists or real estate agents, Marie's eyes followed each one until it disappeared. One morning, she opened her mailbox and found a single envelope. No stamp, no return address, just her name written in an elegant, almost delicate script. Inside, a card bore 5 words. "Balance doesn't stay forever." Marie stared at the words for a long time. She tucked the card away, her mind cataloging paper weight, ink smudge patterns, the slight scent of expensive perfume. David found her staring into space. "Another threat?" he asked gently. Marie slid the card into a manila folder labeled Unknown Actors. "Just a reminder that we're not finished yet." David pulled her into a hug. "We'll handle it. Together." Meanwhile, the neighborhood itself seemed to hum with new energy. People no longer whispered about the HOA behind closed doors. Instead, they spoke openly. Debates flared at meetings, but without fear. Proposals were argued passionately, then voted on in full transparency. The HOA website displayed budgets down to the dollar. Fines, when levied, required 2/3 resident approval. Marie began teaching workshops in the community center on digital privacy. She explained how to spot covert cameras, how to secure home networks, how to recognize intimidation tactics masquerading as bureaucratic procedure. Attendance grew every week. One Saturday, she stood in front of a whiteboard, describing how shell companies used layers of LLCs to hide ownership. Mrs. Perkins sat in the front row, diligently taking notes. "You'd be amazed how many of these so-called management companies trace back to just a few private equity groups," Marie told the crowd. "Follow the money, and you'll see how they're trying to turn entire neighborhoods into cash cows." A man raised his hand. "But why us? Why middle-class neighborhoods?" Marie lowered the marker and met his gaze. "Because we're stable. Because we pay our bills. Because we're not rich enough to hire expensive lawyers, but we're in." Marie found herself invited to testify again. She stood before lawmakers under the bright lights of cameras and said plainly, "When private governments operate without oversight, you get corruption. The people living in these communities deserve constitutional protections, not secret courts run by boards with no accountability." She left to a standing ovation. Afterward, a senator stopped her in the hallway. "You know," he said, "if you ever wanted to run for office, I'd endorse you in a heartbeat." Marie smiled wryly. "Thank you, Senator. But I think I'm more useful staying on the outside, helping people keep their homes." When she returned home, neighbors lined the street with purple ribbons tied around mailboxes. Someone had chalked "Thank you, Marie" in giant letters on the pavement, and yet, she couldn't shake a subtle unease. One evening, as snow fell gently outside, David found her in the living room, staring at her laptop. "Can you ever really rest?" he asked softly. Marie looked at him, her eyes shadowed but fierce. "Every time I think it's over, I remember how easy it was for them to get so close. How close we came to losing everything." David knelt beside her. "But we didn't lose. You won." Marie hesitated. "No. We won. The neighborhood. The community. And we're going to keep winning, as long as we stay awake." She reached for his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. Outside, the lavender lay hidden under blankets of snow, waiting for spring. Underscore 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 underscore. Spring came early the next year. Crocuses burst from the thawing ground, brilliant purple and yellow. Birds returned in flocks, filling the air with music. The lavender in Marie's garden survived the frost and bloomed again, delicate spikes reaching for sunlight. Neighbors planted lavender in clusters up and down the street. The entire block became fragrant, a quiet rebellion against the dark months before. One sunny afternoon, a little girl rode her bike past Marie's house and called out, "My mommy says you saved our homes." Marie waved back, smiling. "Tell your mommy we all saved it together." David came outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He leaned against the porch railing and watched the neighborhood come alive. "You know," he said, "I think this place might be better than it's ever been." Marie sipped her coffee, eyes scanning the rooftops out of habit. "It is, but only because we're paying attention now." David nudged her shoulder. "Think they'll ever try it again?" Marie tilted her head. "Someone will. Somewhere. But maybe not here. At least not for a while." She gazed out at the lavender, bees already darting among the blossoms. "Balance doesn't stay forever," she said quietly. "But we've learned how to hold it." David slipped an arm around her waist. "And we'll keep holding it. Together." Marie leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the gentle breeze stirring the flowers. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to savor the peace they carved out of chaos. But deep in her mind, a part of her remained vigilant, ready to defend not just her lavender, but the freedom it symbolized. Because she knew that in every quiet suburb, in every seemingly tranquil cul-de-sac, there was always someone like Karen waiting to test the limits of power. And when that day came again, Marie would be ready. Spring poured color into the neighborhood, as though trying to wash away all memory of gray skies and fear. Gardens exploded in blossoms. Neighbors opened windows, letting music and laughter drift into the streets. And yet, Marie still caught herself pausing at intersections, scanning rooftops, listening for drones beneath the trill of birdsong. Some days, it felt as if the whole neighborhood were collectively relearning how to breathe. David noticed it too. One evening, he found Marie outside, staring at the lavender as the sun slipped behind the rooftops. He stepped up beside her, silent for a long time. "Does it feel real yet?" he asked finally. Marie shrugged. "Some days." He tilted his head. "And the other days?" She hesitated. "The other days. I feel like I'm waiting for someone to say, just kidding. Back to compliance." David reached for her hand. "We're not going back. We've come too far." Marie turned toward him. "It's not just about us. It's happening everywhere. I keep getting letters from people who don't know where to turn. Retired couples. Single moms. Veterans who fought wars only to come home and fight another one with a homeowners association." David nodded solemnly. "But because of you, they have someone to turn to." Marie studied his face, so earnest and exhausted and loyal, and felt a warmth spread in her chest. The next day, she opened an email from a man in Illinois who'd read about her story in a veteran's newsletter. "They find me for my flagpole, Marie. I've had that pole since the day I retired from the army. They told me it's a visual disturbance. I'm 74 years old. I can't fight them alone." Marie typed back, "You're not alone anymore." Her fingers flew over the keys as she attached resources, legal contacts, and instructions for documenting harassment. When she hit send, she leaned back in her chair and stared at the lavender outside, feeling equal parts exhausted and determined. The Neighborhood Integrity Alliance kept growing. What started as a few residents sharing notes around Marie's dining table had blossomed into a national network. Lawyers offered free consultations. Data analysts volunteered to trace shell companies. A retired judge hosted webinars on homeowners' rights. One weekend, Marie hosted a virtual conference. Nearly 5,000 people logged in. The chat flooded with stories, questions, gratitude. A woman spoke up through tears. "My HOA is threatening to foreclose on me because I put a ramp on my porch for my wheelchair. They said it's non-conforming architecture. I thought I'd have to leave my home." Marie's voice didn't waver. "Don't leave. Document everything. Send me copies. We'll help." David sat behind her, silent and awestruck, as he watched Marie turn into a pillar of strength for strangers hundreds of miles away. When the conference ended, Marie closed her laptop and buried her face in her hands. David rubbed her shoulders. "You're doing good work." Marie lifted her head, eyes shining but tired. "I just want people to feel safe in their homes, David. That shouldn't be too much to ask. Because of you, it's not." One morning in early May, the new HOA board convened its first fully public budget meeting in the community hall. Rows of folding chairs were filled with neighbors holding coffee and notepads. Jim Carson, the Navy vet now serving as board president, stood at the front with spreadsheets projected onto a large screen. "For the first time in this HOA's history," Jim announced, "we're showing every dollar, and every homeowner gets a say." A ripple of applause swept the hall. Mrs. Perkins raised her hand timidly. "Do we really need $600 for decorative holiday wreaths?" Jim grinned. "That's a fair question. Let's vote on it." Marie sat in the back row, watching people laugh and debate instead of cower in silence. For the first time, she felt a spark of genuine hope. After the meeting, Mrs. Hernandez pressed a small bouquet of lavender into Marie's hands. "You saved this place," she whispered. "And you saved me." Marie squeezed her hand. "No, Senora. We saved each other." At home, Marie placed the lavender bouquet on the windowsill. The scent filled the kitchen, sweet and sharp. Yet, she knew the fight wasn't over. A week later, an investigative journalist named Janessa, the same one who'd covered the midnight raid, emailed Marie a series of documents showing a new corporate entity buying foreclosed homes under yet another shell company. Janessa wrote, "It's happening again, Marie. New names. Same tactics. They're calling it Community Renewal LLC." Marie's jaw tightened as she read the list of targeted neighborhoods. David found her pacing the living room, fists clenched. "What is it?" "They're rebranding. They're moving into other towns. Same playbook. Different logo. David exhaled. So we keep fighting. Marie looked him in the eye. We keep fighting. Late that night, Marie lay awake listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant barking of a dog. David slept beside her, one arm draped protectively across her waist. She gazed up at the ceiling, counting seconds between her own steady breaths, and though exhaustion pressed on her shoulders like lead, she felt something else beneath it, a quiet certainty, a flame that refused to go out, because she understood now that home wasn't merely walls and a roof. Home was standing your ground. Home was refusing to bow to bullies in suits or uniforms. Home was a lavender plant trembling in the wind, fragile and stubborn and impossibly alive, and as long as she had breath in her lungs, Marie would protect it.